All right, we're going to pick up where we left off last time. We talked about the beginning of what we call macroeconomics. It began with the Great Depression, began with the work of a guy named John Maynard Keynes. And the system, the grid, the framework, the interpretive framework of how the economy as a whole worked is called Keynesianism. And I said that was a revolutionary sort of work. And part of the revolution was that Keynes said, well, yeah, everything that we know about economics in the classical view, when we're talking about the individual person, the microeconomy, if we're talking about cabbages at the farmer's market, yeah, the supply and demand model, it works great and it's true and you don't have to worry about it. Everything works fine at the microeconomic level. But once we leave microeconomics and we look at the economy as a whole, as an entire unit, then these laws of microeconomics and this supply and demand analysis, we're in a different universe. And when you're in a different universe, you've got different rules and different laws going on. And what we know as gravity on Earth might be completely different than what we call gravity on Mars or Pluto or wherever it is, because I got to get out of the universe. I got further out. We go into a different galaxy, into a different universe. Then the laws are different, and macroeconomics functions on a different set of rules and principles than microeconomics. And so, not only are they different, they're contradictory. They're almost the reverse of what we believe to be true about microeconomics. So I'm going to expand on that as we start to explain the Keynesian view and the standard orthodoxy of macroeconomics. Now, I put on the board here 3 different macroeconomic views. And with these views, I put 3 associated and different names. So obviously, John Maynard Keynes goes with something called Keynesianism, just as Milton Friedman, his view goes with something we call monetarism. And this fellow Ludwig von Mises, that's how you pronounce it, Mises, goes with the Austrian view, which is a variety of the old classical school that we talked about in the last segment. And each of these views has a different policy. We said policy is when the government takes an economic idea and acts on that idea, usually by creating a law based upon that idea in order to get an economic outcome that it sees as desirable. That's what we mean by policy. So with the Keynesian view, we're going to see a fiscal policy. With a monetarism, we're going to have a monetary policy. And there really is no name for this category right here for reasons that will become obvious to you later on. So this is my made-up policy name, the non-interventionist policy, because it's not in any textbook, because I had to make up something that fills this slot, and so I made up the term non-interventionist policy. Now what we want to do in this section is talk about this one right here in a big view, in an overall view. But let me first say that all of these views, and this is about as far on one side of the spectrum as this one is on the other side of the spectrum, and we're going to see that this one is in the center here. Not in the center, it's kind of down here, but it's not on the extreme of either one. And so that's why I placed them that way. Now, all of these views are attempting to answer the question, why do depressions occur? Why? Why do we have a business cycle? Why do we have recessions and depression? And each of these views has a different answer to that question. And similarly, we want to address the question of, well, how do we correct for this economic problem called depression or severe recession, or correct for something called an inflationary or hyperinflationary economy? How do we fix it? And obviously, each of these schools has a different view of how it should be fixed. And then thirdly, each of these three views has a different view of what should be the role of the government. What role should the government play in this process? And what role should the Federal Reserve Central Bank play in this process? And again, all three views have radically different opinions, perspectives on the answer to that question. And they all want to solve what our text calls the four central macroeconomic problems. I'll list them for you. Number one is economic growth. How do we deal with assuring that we get economic growth? That's a good thing, at least in the eyes of most economists. And how do we handle this business cycle? And the worst of the business cycle is the downturn we call not just a slump, not just a recession, not just an extended recession, but a depression. That's the real bottom of a business cycle. How do we deal with that? Thirdly, how do we deal with inflation? And we'll spend a considerable amount of time talking about the theory behind inflation. And then fourthly, here we are back to this thing I said, keeping your eye on the ball when it comes to recessions and depression, and that is unemployment. If you keep, the idea there is if we can solve the unemployment problem, everything else can take care of itself. That's why I said you got to keep your eye on the ball. And the idea of full employment or unemployment is the central idea behind how do we fix this Great Depression era. Okay, now that you have these, you have them in your notes. They're not listed like this in your text, and you have them in your notes. And we're going to be comparing and contrasting and learning about these three different views for the rest of the semester. So you just want to memorize this. Memorize the three radically different views, the three key names that go with those views, and the key policies that go with each of those views. Before I digress into Keynesianism, let me tell you just a little bit more about fiscal policy, because we're here. Fiscal policy has to do with the federal government's attempt to control the economy. That's what fiscal policy is all about. So when I say the government, I mean Congress and the President and the Council of Economic Advisors. I mean the federal government. And the federal government has two major tools of fiscal policy. I don't know if you can read that. Tax and spend. Tax and spend. In other words, the federal government attempts to control the macroeconomy through increasing or decreasing taxes or increasing and decreasing spending. Now let me give you an analogy here. After class, you'll probably get in your car, start it up, and to make the car go the direction you want, you have a steering wheel. If you want it to go left, you take the top of the steering wheel and you turn it counterclockwise. If you want to go right, you take the top of the steering wheel and you turn it clockwise. Did I get that right? Hopefully. I don't know, I get kind of confused in front of the camera, so you got to check up on me now and then. Now, that's how we operate a motor vehicle. But if we were on a bulldozer, Caterpillar bulldozer, they don't have steering wheels. They usually have levers or foot things. I'll just call them levers. And in one lever, if you push this lever forward, these tracks go forward. You pull it back, these tracks go back. Push this lever forward, they go forward. You push this back, these tracks go back. Oh. So we could have any combination of one forward, or the other forward, or one back, or the other back, or this one forward, this one back, or this one forward, this one back, or both back, both forward, right? Because they're not linked. They're not linked together. But with a steering wheel, you turn the steering wheel and those wheels are linked together. They're linked together. But with a bulldozer, these two levers, they're not linked together. Now the reason I bring up that analogy is because if you understand fiscal policy as steering the economy like a bulldozer, where you've got a tax lever, which can go more taxes, less taxes, and a spending lever, which is more government spending and less government spending. And if you keep firmly in mind, under the Keynesian view, these two levers are not linked. They're not linked. You can have more spending, more taxes, or more spending, less taxes, or less spending, less taxes. You can have any combination you want because they're not linked. Let me go back to microeconomics as an example. If you're like me, you got a checkbook. Money comes in and boy does it go out. It's a struggle to get it in, but it just goes out like water. Now, at the microeconomic level, Keynes would agree. There is a relationship between input, money coming in, and expenditures, output, money going out. They're linked. You can't have no money coming in and a lot of money going out. Oh, that's going to spell trouble, right? That's going to spell a lot of trouble. At the microeconomic level, that's true. But Keynes said, at the macroeconomic level, there's no problem there. There's no problem. Wait. Of course there's a problem. The government has a checkbook, I got a checkbook. No, that's the problem with your thinking. You're thinking that the macroeconomy is like the microeconomy, and you can't think like that. Get that out of your mind, or you'll never be able to understand macroeconomics. But I thought it's immoral to spend more money than you make. I thought it's immoral to go into. There you go again. You're trying to take microeconomics and what applies to you as an individual, and you're trying to say that same philosophy, that same thing applies to the government and the national economy. See how you just don't understand macroeconomics if you continue to think in microeconomic terms. I think we need to go to the circular flow model of the economy. And I'm going to erase this, but make sure you have it in your notes. And next, it's enough for you to know that fiscal policy has to do with the federal government. And I'll just say quickly, and then we'll stop with this, that monetary policy has to do with the Federal Reserve. Two different institutions. This is the federal government, has to do with the President and Congress. Monetary policy has to do with the central bank, the Federal Reserve. Okay? And now I'm going to erase it, and we're going to stop there, and we're going to go into the next session.